Hi, I'm John Majani, and I've been helping customers solve their digital identity needs for many years. Today, I'm going to show you how to take a step towards solving one of the most important problems in a zero trust network security architecture, the identity. This is a quote from the NIST Special Publication 800-207. So for anyone who hasn't memorized each of the NIST publication numbers, this one is otherwise known as Zero Trust Architecture and was last updated in August 2020. I've highlighted what I think, in terms of this discussion, is the most important point. Identity of both person and non-person entities is crucial to the deploying of a zero trust architecture correctly. We'll come back to this later in the talk. Don't get too worried about the number of items we're going to cover today. While many of you are familiar with, some more, some less, the zero trust architecture, it's worth spending a little bit of time on the topic to ensure you get an understanding of how partnering with Sectigo will help you in your efforts to embrace the zero trust architecture. First things first, a little bit of history. So the early 90s were a significant number of time for a number of reasons. Most important for this talk was the rise of the computer virus. Back before the world went wholly online, and back when the internet and the web were really still the ARPANET, most people exchanged data by sending each other floppy disks. Roads, shipping lanes, and flight paths were the highest bandwidth networks back then. The ARPANET was connecting higher education, government, and military sites together, and security was enforced with some network isolation and now the much maligned password. Mainframe computers were shipped with super user accounts pre-created and rarely protected. The enterprise CISA role barely existed, if at all, and trust and implicit trust was the dominant posture. For anyone who remembers the late 80s well, or anyone who's read The Cuckoo's Egg, you'll probably recall the Morris worm, one of the world's first, though accidental, DDoS attacks on the Unix network, a self-replicating worm that exploited a number of vulnerabilities in the finger daemon, a flaw in the sendmail program, and the transitive trust established between connected nodes. Nearly 40 years later, these classes of problems are still with us. The zero trust mindset with a strong identity footing is key to addressing them. By the way, John's highly secure network topology was a real thing, a fully secure point-to-point protocol I wrote to interconnect two computers over a null modem cable. It was highly secure because I could only connect two computers together. There's no authentication involved, but because the computers were in my basement, because I was the only person I knew with an interest in computers, I was pretty confident that my security would not be breached. Today, of course, I probably need to do a better job, but once a nerd, always a nerd. So the nature of work has dramatically changed, in particular over the last 2 years. There are over 21 billion connected devices on the internet today, and that means each endpoint is not just subject to attack, but each endpoint can be a source of attack. Even before the perimeter was gone, or at least blurred, you could mount an attack by bringing in a thumb drive containing malware and putting it into the network. Just establishing a perimeter was never really enough. We used access controls and network isolation to segment and protect the contents of our networks. I recently read a topic on LinkedIn that talked about an event whereby an enterprise had wiped out all traces of a critical piece of intellectual property, but were saved because an employee had downloaded a copy of the IP onto a personal device. The company was able to recover it. I'm sure there were sighs of relief and cheers, but this underscores two very important lessons. One, intellectual property. In fact, anything related to the production or execution of the business needs to be backed up and refreshed frequently, if not constantly. Two, allowing someone to download critical IP onto a personal device, especially with no audit trail, is a sign that your security policies need to be reviewed. With the cloud edge models available to us today, and assuming your network has been properly architected and security orchestrated, there are very few reasons why data needs to be downloaded onto personal devices. So while this story may have had a happy ending, What if it had been an external threat actor or even a malicious employee? Zero trust and edge architectures combine identity and access controls to ensure that only the right users with the right privileges are able to take actions. For any organization who has recently tried to hire professional IT people, whether developers, managers, or IT security experts, you'll know that there is a significant shortage of talented prospects. As organizations continue their relentless digital evolution, the demand for experts has grown faster than we can produce them. The result? A lot of very happy employees, but also a lot of IT departments whose human capital is spread too thin. Zero trust architectures coupled with network automation and orchestration is an approach to addressing these border security needs. So a moment ago, I talked about human and non-human identities being the cornerstone of zero trust security. I wanted to mention that again. You can't do effective security without considering both, and this has a potential for further complicating and encumbering IT and SecOps. While there's more to zero trust than what you see here, I take these four elements as key to ensuring your security model will meet your needs. We're going to focus on the last two topics for the remainder of this talk. So there are many ways to present and verify an identity. Some of them imply a degree of implicit trust, such as badging in at a door, while others require higher proofs, authenticating to a smart card with perhaps a biometric to a machine that's managed by an enterprise with access rules imposed. So the process of creating and establishing any identity is not hard. Even a username and password gets the job done. If you could use the same simple username and password everywhere you went, life would be simple, but it would be very insecure in the aggregate. So everyone has heard something like this in some form or another. And while it's said that you can't protect something you know nothing about, you can certainly distrust what you don't know. And you can also start by distrusting even what you think you know. This isn't just a kind of philosophy, but a reality, especially from the point of view of this talk. So zero trust tells you to assume a state of no trust. And then by frequent interrogation and verification, you build it up. So trust rises and falls with time as machines and humans repeatedly interact with our networks. But the first step in assessing trust is to get a handle on who or what you're being asked to trust. And this is the core of the identity conundrum. We need mechanisms to confidently issue identities, and then we can begin the laborious process of trusting them as they move through our networks. SASE architectures are focused on putting services closer to users, which ultimately means taking them out from behind VPNs and firewalls in a corporate housed infrastructure, and moving them to the network's edge, which is usually cloud or mobile edge computing. This these put increasingly, sorry, putting them there becomes increasingly global and always on. But pushing services out to the edge often means data replication across regional boundaries, increased demands for automation, and an increased need for vigilance. SASE architectures encourage the use of automation tools to deploy and protect those assets at the edge. So how do you protect them? You do it by starting with a zero trust mindset and verifying early and often both the machines through which the data flows and the users that claim the right to access them. The key here is the recognition of machine and human as both client and threat, and a certificate-based identity-first approach using Sectigo to issue and manage an endpoint's identity lifecycle simplifies and secures the process. So I keep using the phrase identity first, and it's for good reason. So how do we go about putting identity first? Well, we start by examining all the options available to us for proving identity. So let's start with the human element. The factors for human identity verification have improved over the years. Where there were traditional password-based identities, we now have other factors such as SMS code delivery, physical and virtual one-time passcode tokens, FIDO certificates, and even invisible factors such as context and human behavior. Each of these approaches can have benefits and drawbacks. Balancing cost, security, and usability is the challenge. So when we look at machine identity factors, there are far fewer options. We might make use of machine fingerprinting, whether it's attested or unattested, or digital certificates. There are fewer options for several reasons. External factors such as physical tokens or SMS require a human intermediary to copy the code from one device to the other. And factors such as FIDO are based on asymmetric cryptography, but they're a weaker form of the stronger digital certificate approach, and therefore not really the ideal choice. So I encourage you to embrace simplicity, but only when you don't have to sacrifice security. You're destined to have to secure and manage human machine identities. This is how it's always been. But today, by pushing services out to the edge and by taking a zero trust approach to security, you've already got enough to worry about. The right approach is to converge your identity to only one factor that solves for both and can be managed from a single solution: Sectigo digital certificates. In the old world, PKI was known as something that was hard to deploy and manage, and that was undoubtedly true. The Sectigo Certificate Manager Public and Private CA and Certificate Lifecycle Management has gone a long way to solve these problems of complexity and reliability. And with the recent announcement of our CA agnostic approach, you don't have to throw out your old CA, though you could. This sets you on a path to future-proof security that aids your adoption of an identity-first approach to zero trust architectures. Yes, you can still use your OTPs and SMS, and you can use FIDO. But when you've got an easy to deploy and easy to manage digital certificate-based solution, why would you? Digital certificates fit every form factor: smart cards, tokens, mobile devices, virtual machines, containers, and even IoT devices. We make digital security simple, and simple is better. By now, I hope I've been able to convince you that identities based on digital certificates are a possibility. Aside from solving the identity convergence issue and the security issue, certificate-based human identities bring you closer to the promise of a fully passwordless enterprise. So what makes certificates passwordless? They're passwordless because of the careful way we create and deploy them. We can ensure that the private keys are generated inside the secure hardware of whichever device will host them, computer or mobile or token. And once secured, cannot be extracted from the device, and the private key will not be hosted in the back end, with, of course, the exception of SMIME, depending on your security and retention policies. We can further protect the use of the certificate on the device, where it's by adding the enforcement of a PIN or a biometric policy. And most importantly, your human users can go beyond authentication with digital signatures and encryption options. This further improves your security posture by helping limit the effectiveness of such attacks as phishing by immediately and clearly identifying emails that have not been signed by a trusted sender. So how is Sectigo helping customers achieve a zero trust identity first reality? If you have ever issued digital certificates to your users for authentication, whether to legacy applications, web-based apps, VPNs, or Wi-Fi, you've already really taken the first step to passwordless. So let's look at some of the recent capabilities Sectigo has made available to customers to further simplify the issuance of identities to users on different types of platforms. So we recently announced support for small business, enterprise, and K-12 to higher ed that allows users to easily enroll their Chromebooks for both device and user certificates using the native Chromebook platform keys technology to protect the private keys in the TPM. We started with a simple and standards-based SCEP enrollment approach, which requires only your Chromebook extension and a Sectigo Certificate Manager CA, along with your Google Enterprise account. Your Google Enterprise administrators can quickly set up and enable zero trust access to data and applications. We designed the solution with novice users in mind. No more than 2 clicks, every user can enroll for both device and user certificates. We made it simple without sacrificing security. What about supporting What about support for digital signature and email encryption? We've also got you covered there with our SMIME integration for Google Enterprise. Now you can integrate your enterprise Gmail with our Sectigo Key Vault to seamlessly issue SMIME certificates to your Gmail cloud users. Now you've got everything you need to secure your endpoints and secure your communications, all with the Sectigo Certificate Manager and a couple of client applications. Later in 2022, we'll be further evolving our Chromebooks capabilities to take advantage of direct integration with Google's Cloud Directory to further allow administrators to manage users under a single pane of glass with their public and private CAs. But Windows continues to be the dominant platform for enterprise work and the clear leader for targeted attacks. No zero trust architecture is complete without addressing the need to onboard and manage Windows machines and users. We've had many customers reach out to us to help them address user identity security needs for both domain joined and domainless machines. And while the easy answer is usually to just join every machine to your domain, sometimes that's just not possible. So think about what happens when you have contractors or partners that belong to external organizations that need constrained access to your networks for perhaps short periods of time. Often it's not feasible to have an extra hoard of unassigned hardware that you can just hand out. And it's very unlikely that your contractors and partners will allow you to join their machines to your domain, and you probably don't want to do that either. So what's the security department to do? It's simple. You deploy an agent on the external machine that allows you to securely enroll an identity onto that machine, and you can set the lifetime of the identity certificate to be as short as you like. So how are we supporting customers today with this? We take advantage of their existing IAM investment and leverage it to perform the initial bootstrap process. This allows them to fully control how they want the onboarding process to evolve. And once that's complete, we add the user to our platform, and using our Sectigo security client for Windows, we're then able to enroll the identity into the user's certificate store on the machine, and we enforce the use of TPM for key generation so that you know the key cannot be exported to another machine. This is particularly important when you don't control the machine. With the passwordless identity directly enrolled into the Windows desktop, there's no need for an external device like a smart card or a mobile phone, and this represents a potentially significant savings in both capital and operational costs. In some regions, employers are required to reimburse employees who use their personal devices in any capacity to complete their day-to-day responsibilities, even if that means copying a single OTP from an SMS message to authenticate. This is really just the beginning. Sectigo is investing in its position of being an identity-first solution provider. We've got some exciting advancements coming later in 2022 that will further simplify issuing certificate-based identities to users on nearly any type of device to address almost every identity use case, from authentication to digital signatures and encryptions. Can your current identity provider do that? So zero trust is about human and non-human identities. So let's spend just a few minutes talking about how Sectigo helps you address your machine identity needs. I'm not going to go too in depth in this area. My colleague Raghavendra will be talking more about DevOps and integrations in this summit, so I won't cover it in depth. I just wanted to bring your attention to the fact that Sectigo does support a number of third-party integrations that allow you to easily address issuing machine identities. Our approach to DevOps integrations allows you to scale your management of physical and virtual machines as well as containers. And you'll see continued investment in this area for the rest of 2022 and beyond. And what do we mean by single pane of glass? It means that all of those use cases, DevOps, containers, integrations, Windows, Chromebooks, and more can all be managed and visualized from the same platform. You'll also have the opportunity to hear about our other solutions, including SSH certificate management during the summit. And as you do so, keep in mind that our goal is to allow you to manage all of this from one company's offering, and that company is Sectigo. So as we're coming to the end, it's time to reflect on a couple of realities. Humans like it easy. No one wants to be constantly fumbling for their phone to answer a phone verification or typing out a long digit SMS code. In fact, no one wants to authenticate at all. They just want to get to work, get the job done. We want to put human digital identities as close to human hands, fingers, and eyeballs as possible, and no closer. Get the job done, and then get out of the way. Admins are humans. Yes, they are. Lots of people complain about corporate IT policies, but admins need to tread the thin, fine line between security and usability. It's not an easy task. Admins are very busy. The fact is that system admins have a lot on their plates. It's one of the hardest jobs in enterprise today. They need to make sure services are up and running, both on premises and in the cloud. They need to help integrate new systems into the organization and sometimes discover shadow IT lurking in the dark corners of some department. And they've got to make sure that all of this is accessible and secure. It's no easy task. We want to help make it easier for them. There's no such thing as infinite riches. Every organization has its budget, and it's never more than we need. Consolidating your service providers to the best in each category, access management, zero trust, firewall, and identity, can help you deliver the best possible services securely without infinite riches. Rip and replace hurts. Last summer, when things were largely still closed down where I live, I took the opportunity to rip out all the plumbing in my cottage and replace it with PEX. It hurt. The space under the cottage was shallow, and falling pink insulation is bad for the breathing, but I got the job done. You don't have to do this with your security infrastructure. You can start moving in a zero trust direction by just updating your identity solutions and then gradually building on that. If you're lucky enough to be starting fresh, then thinking about solving your identity needs first is the right approach. Sectigo passwordless identities. So you've probably been using these for years, even if you didn't know you could call it passwordless. So go ahead and shout it from the rooftops. But know that we're expanding our offerings and continuing to innovate to meet the evolving architectural and business needs of IT organizations. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy and get value from the rest of our summit.